Oh, hello, everyone. This is Michelle Biggs, CEO of My Best Everyday Coaching and Consulting. And I'm bringing to you a special segment of Coaching Moments with Michelle. It is something that I kicked off just this year. And it is a forum where I want to leverage to provide you with coaching tips around a variety of topics. And for today, I actually have a special guest with me. Her name is Michelle Krebs. Michelle, how
Hello.
are you? Hello, hello,
Hi.
hello,
Great.
Michelle.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, yeah, Michelle. This segment, I wanted to have you on this segment because when I think about career transitions, I was thinking about who do I know has made a huge transition more recently, who can kind of speak about her experience. I know I have made some changes in my life, but it's been 20 years when I think about when I moved from New York to North Carolina, moved from a financial services industry to a pharmaceutical industry, and that did come with some anxiety and just some newness and me trying to get my foot grounded in just this new space, right? But you have made a huge change. Has it been a year? Has it been a year now? Has it been more than a year?
And almost a year and a half. It was a year last November. COVID just makes everything fly by. So
Okay. So why don't you there, Michelle?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah, I can hear you. We had a little bit of a let me make sure my connection is good. But yes, I can hear you. I can hear you, Michelle. Can you hear
Yeah.
me?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So why don't you tell the audience a little bit about the transition that you made this past year and a half?
Well, yeah, I left corporate America a year and a half ago to step into my own coaching and consulting business, Bloom Coaching and Consulting. And, perhaps just sharing a little bit of my background journey leading up to that phase of leaving, right? So I spent a little over 20 years in the healthcare segment, and I started with a healthcare company and then transitioned into pharma. And my, 20-year career in pharma, for the most part, was in the commercial sales organization through various roles. As a sales rep, I started many years ago, but then moved probably for the last 18 years in various leadership roles as a sales manager, as working in marketing and strategic planning and operations, but in all those roles supporting the sales organization, and spent the latter part of my career at GSK in the specialty biologics division as the field sales VP before really stepping into my passion around coaching. And I'm sure we'll get into more of this, but had the opportunity to spend a little bit of time inside GSK doing that before I stepped out onto my own.
Yeah, so let's talk about that in terms of what was your trigger that made you decide to move into this coaching space, Michelle?
Well, I would say my trigger was working with an executive coach. So
Mhm.
my first experience or introduction into coaching, working for a big company, I had so many opportunities for fabulous development programs through leadership development training. But about 10 years ago, I had the first opportunity to work with a coach through a women's leadership development program that I was in. And working with that coach, it was by far the most transformational development growth personally and professionally that I had ever experienced. And it was a very different type of development than anything I had in my formal training. And every time I got off the call with my coach, I just had this voice in my head saying, like, oh, you should look into that. You would be really great at that. That would be something I think you'd really enjoy doing. But I really didn't see where it would fit into my current career development plan that I had. And I loved what I was doing and I loved the path that I was on. And the company I worked for was so great to me. So it really was more in the back of my mind. And I thought, one day when I'm ready for my sunset career and ready to step into retirement, maybe I'll look into that.
Yeah.
And, but it was always in the back of my mind. And then about 6 years later, I had the opportunity to be a part of another development program for executive women's leadership. And I had the opportunity to work with an executive coach. And this time she happened to be an internal executive coach. And when I went through coaching the first time, there were no internal executive coaches. So for the
Mm-hmm.
first time, it gave me a glimpse into a possibility of where I could explore doing something that I loved, but also staying at the company that I loved and exploring options to potentially marry the two.
Yeah, and Michelle, I remember because I was your HR business lead at the time,
You were.
and I remember us having that conversation, and I think that's something people do not recognize. And again, depending on the size of your company, the partnership with HR is huge. I mean, it is a place that people can go. Again, depending on the size of the company, if you have HR business partners, what we call embedded business partners, having those conversations because we can act as advocates for employees at all levels, right? As they think
Mhm.
about the career. So I remember you and I talking about that, and this opportunity came up for you to actually do a rotation, right?
Mhm.
So talk a little bit about that experience and how you
Yeah.
got to that point. Yep.
Well, so through my coach, working with my coach, it really helped me to discover that I didn't know what it was gonna look like. So for me, stepping into the space of the unknown was a little bit scary. I like to know what everything's gonna look like. I think a lot of us can relate to the need to know what the future is gonna look like.
Mhm.
But working with my coach, it really solidified. I knew that I wanted to, at some point, invest in coaching, being a coach, but I was also in a leadership role, and as a leader wore many different hats. One of them was a coach, but certainly, carried many different titles in that leadership role. And, really through a lot of kind of soul searching with my coach, I decided that I wanted to get an executive coaching certification. So I enrolled on my own in a 12-month program, was very supported by the organization to do it. And I really wasn't sure where it was going to lead me or what was going to happen. But I just felt like it was the right step. And at the worst case scenario, it would help me build my coaching skills to be a better leader. And, I did that 12-month program. And at the end of the 12-month program, almost to the day, when I got my coaching certification, a position opened up in our Global Coaching Center of Excellence inside GSK, supporting North America and Latin America for an 18-month rotation. And, of course, I went to you and our leadership team, and with tremendous support from the organization. It was an interesting conversation, though, because while I think everyone knew my, passion around coaching was evident, I think it showed up in a lot of the ways that I led my teams in the coaching that I emphasis that I placed. Working in a global HR space is very different, very different than
Mhm.
working in a commercial leadership space. And so while coaching wasn't foreign to me, stepping into that space of HR was very foreign. And
Yeah, I know I
that was an
laughed because
interesting
I'm like,
transition.
I was like, welcome to HR. Now that you're gonna get the hell that I receive in a
It was
different
like
way.
the glimpse behind the curtain, right?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. But you were able to make that move into a development rotation, so it wasn't a permanent role, right? And that's something that I think my listeners should understand. As a tip, sometimes development doesn't necessarily come into a permanent role. You definitely can move
Mhm.
into a permanent role, but you can also seek out opportunities where you can do a development type of rotation where you're testing the waters, right?
Mhm.
Of course, you need to talk to your company to make sure that's something that's available to you. But again, a different way to dip your toe into something and learn something new without fully um, jumping in as a permanent role.
Mhm.
So you did that, Michelle. And how long were you in the rotation?
I
Was
was
it
in
two
the
years?
rotation. It ended up being about 20 months. So it was
Okay.
set for 18 months. We did a short extension on the tail end.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, a little over a year and a half.
Yep. And then the day came where we learned that okay, had to make a decision,
Yeah.
right? Because we had made some changes in how our internal coaching organization was going to be set up, right? And you had a decision point
Yeah.
to make.
Well,
Yeah.
it really led up. well in advance. So again, so grateful for the organization that I worked for, the transparency, the support. I knew probably about 9 months before I was going to be leaving that I was going to need to make a decision. At that point, when I took the role, my hope was that there'd be an opportunity to continue in that space of global coaching center of excellence. But while I was in the role, the organization was going through some changes to decide what the future of coaching was going to look like. And it became pretty clear that we would be outsourcing a lot of
Mhm.
the work that was being done. And so it was pretty clear that staying in that coaching space wasn't going to work. And so I really began to explore what else is that going to look like. So I had probably about a 9 month runway where I was able to continue to develop my coaching skills and get a wide variety of experience in developing as a leader while also exploring other options to consider. So I explored other leadership roles in other areas of the business. I explored external roles, stepping in as an internal coach in other companies, and looked at going out on my own. And I really committed through
Mhm.
that window because I knew I had 9 months before I had to make the decision that I'm not going to make a decision. I'm going to give myself permission to just be in an exploratory phase and be really curious to possibility and open to maybe things that I otherwise wouldn't have considered, and try to just stay really connected and grounded in really where, my faith is really important to me. So where I felt God calling me to be, to take that
Yeah.
next step, because it was really a pretty open canvas, which is exciting, but can be very scary too. So giving myself the permission to just stay in that space of curiosity released me from feeling like I had to force a decision.
Yeah. One of the things I like, Michelle, that you talked about is it's just that exploration phase, which for a
Mhm.
lot of that, it's networking, right? Talk
Mhm.
about the importance of networking.
Gosh, yes. So I would say early on in my career, I was terrible at networking, and I
Mhm.
shouldn't say terrible. I networked inside the organization, but I did not network outside of the organization. And, through the years of being at the same company, fortunately for me, a lot of my network expanded as some of my close colleagues left and went to other organizations, and it started to expand that network. But the best thing that that rotation gave me of the 18 months is not only did it allow me to build my coaching skills, but it really connected me into a fabulous coaching community that I would have otherwise not really had or known existed. And so GSK worked with a blend of internal and external coaches. And so, with the faculty of external coaches that we had, I had the opportunity to meet and work with amazing coaches that coached across the country, across the globe, and had a vast variety of background experiences and differences. And so, building that network of coaches, really, they kind of became my mentors, my peers. If you don't know the coaching community, which I know you do, but the coaching community is so willing to offer and give so much
Mhm.
support to other people. And it gave me an opportunity to really understand all of these amazing coaches. Most of them worked in a career prior to coaching. So, what was that experience like for them? How did they transition? How did they build their coaching practice? And really connecting into that network and that community was really important. But also through the journey, I met with a lot of other business leaders as well, because I knew that I wanted to do something different than, I didn't want to go back. I wanted to
Yeah.
keep going in forward progress. And so, I met with leaders that I had worked with in the past that had left and gone to other organizations. I met with leaders that had gone into other businesses within the organization. And it was really critical for me in making the decision of having that network. And it was probably the biggest factor that played into me deciding to leave, because of having that network. When the biggest challenge I find with having a network is the further you get away from that, the harder it is to just stay connected. And that has to be a strong intentionality to stay connected with people that you've worked with in the past. And coming fresh out of that coaching space, I had a really large network of coaches that I felt were very invested in helping me to succeed, and had consistently reached out And so I felt like going out on my own, I didn't really have to do it alone. I had people that had the experience and the capabilities and built very successful coaching practices on their own that I knew would be there to help guide me and support me. And it really made the transition feel a lot easier than had I not had that support going into it.
Yeah, and that's one of the things. I'm a coach for several development programs at GSK. One for diverse men and the other one for women. And Michelle, as you have talked about, a lot of people do not network, and more importantly, they're not comfortable with networking, right? So
Mhm,
one of the things that I know we have talked about as coaches is how do we get people comfortable with doing it? That is
mhm,
where you build your advocacy, and that is so important. You build your advocacy, and also you start to build your knowledge of what really is out there, right? In terms of direction that you might be looking to go. I think also through networking, you can build sponsors and even
mhm,
mentors, right? Which
mhm.
become very important when you're looking to potentially make a change. And I know, even you coming into that space of coaching, you did that well in terms of just talking to. I mean, we all have leaned on Stephanie. Stephanie is the person I know
Mhm,
all of us have leaned on as our internal coach, right? Guru of
mhm,
executive coaching for us inside. But also, as you mentioned, you're networking outside as
mhm.
as well. So it is very important, my audience, very important to get comfortable with networking and working with a coach. We can help you get comfortable with it, right? You got to do it your way. It has to be authentic, but you do need to get comfortable with it. And it is a way to gain a competitive edge as
Yeah.
well, right? Don't you
You
agree,
know,
Michelle?
it is, and
Mhm.
I stole this from someone actually still inside GSK, Lorenzo Clarity. He had shared
Yeah.
at one of, the diverse men development programs about, he is ex-military, so he called it
Yes.
building his Department of Defense and
Mhm.
really building the people around you, and so when I left, I took that advice around building my personal board of directors. And so I have my cheerleader, somebody
Yep.
that when I need to be pumped up and I'm getting down on myself or doubting that I would call. I have my spiritual warrior when I need prayer and guidance. I have my mentor, Stephanie, that I still call regularly when I need guidance or a thought partner, somebody to brainstorm. So I have built people that are in my personal network that have committed to being mentors for me, but also really kind of building that personal board of directors to be able to help support my ongoing development. The biggest transition for me in this type of career move of going from corporate out to my own is when you're when it's just you, it can feel very lonely, being out by yourself, but recognizing that you don't have to do it alone. It's actually, I thought transitioning into my own that was unique for me, but what I find that I actually coach a lot of leaders around, and I think especially in the last year with COVID, because everybody's working from home now, is it's a reoccurring thing with leaders of feeling like they're trying to do it all on their own,
Yep.
rather than reaching out for support and reaching out for the people around them that they can lean on. So I think, that building the right people around you that can support you and help, and and you give something back to them along the way as well. But that's definitely been a huge benefit.
I know, and I know as I stepped out into my space, because like you said, we do coaching at work. We've done it at work. What
Yeah.
you find out when you go through a coaching program, a true coaching program, what we find is that we really haven't been doing coaching in the true spirit of what coaching really is.
Mhm.
Right. But I know I was talking about this in an earlier segment. What I found myself doing is leveraging the principle of coaching now in everything that I do. Right.
Mhm.
But finding that community, because I know when I stepped out and really started promoting my external business, you were one of the people that I called, like, Michelle, What did you do? What have you been doing? What's worked? What hasn't worked? And I've talked to a couple of the people and asked them the same question. So again, establishing that network of people
Mhm.
who you can talk to confidentially about things that you're doing or trying to do, but also just building that support network, going forward. Because you never know when, I mean, you and I talked about some other things we might be able to do from a collaboration standpoint. You
Mhm.
just don't know who might be in your network who can help you with the things that you're trying to do, even advocating for you for a position, right?
Mhm.
Inside your organization or outside your organization. So networking is very important. Okay, Michelle. So we talked a lot about the questions that we talked a lot about the questions I was going to ask you. What was the one or two things that solidified for you that starting your own business and becoming a coach was right for you?
Well, gosh. Okay. So when I mentioned I started that journey, it was interesting. So one of the things that I adopted probably about that time was journaling. And I had journaled a little bit over the years, off and on, but nothing consistently. But I committed that I was going to take the intentionality to journal daily so that, I mentioned I was able to give myself permission to stay in that curiosity, decision free zone. But just knowing that there was a decision looming that I was going to need to make, there was a lot of fear around what that was going to look like because my career path up to that point had been very calculated. I knew what I was planning for next, the position I was working towards. I had succession planned. I had my sponsors aligning me to make sure that I was going to get the next role. I had mentors. I knew what was expecting. And so I had a pretty clear development path of the next role of where I was going. And so being in that space of known unknown was very scary. And so I committed to really journaling and writing out. And it was also kind of my prayer guide that I would write out. And it could be anything from what I was feeling to what I was thinking. Sometimes it was an idea that would pop in my head or a story from the past, all these random things. But when I made the decision to finally leave and I went back and I looked at my journal and I kept just saying, God, lead me where you want, help me to, just to be open and just not, to just explore any path that comes my way. And when I went back and read through the journal, I laughed out loud because I would write something like, okay, this position, I really want this position. It was like a leadership position in like R&D, which is
Mm-hmm.
totally foreign to me. And I'm like, how I really want this position. And I would write like three sentences about that. And then I'd write like 3 pages about building my coaching practice. But I totally
Mm,
discredited all that I was writing about what my heart was really telling me about coaching because I thought the fear in me was telling me go the safe route.
mm-hmm.
And then when I explored, a startup company I was interviewing for, okay, this is really what I want. And I'd write like 2 sentences about it. And then again, like 3 pages about building out my coaching practice. And so as I went back, the biggest aha for me, first of all, I highly recommend journaling,
Mm-hmm.
is not necessarily journaling in the moment, but the ability to go back and read afterwards and see the connections that run through that continuous thought pattern.
Mm-hmm.
And what was so obvious as I went back and read it, when I was in the middle of it, I really felt conflicted, like I didn't know what I needed to do. But I really knew what I needed to do. It was just releasing the fear that was holding me back from stepping in and actually making that decision to go.
Mm-hmm.
I really felt like, my whole career built up to this. When I was young in my 20s, even like right when I started with GSK, I used to always say, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to have my own business someday. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
where that ever came from, but I
Mm-hmm.
just always said, someday I'm going to have my own business. And I even told myself one of the stories I said is I want to work in as many different areas as I can while I'm at GSK so I can learn. So one day when I have my own business, I'll have all of this background of experience that I can carry forward. And people would ask me, well, what is your business going to be? I'm like, I don't know.
I
I don't know what
know.
it's going to
I
be, but
know.
I just know that I'm going to have it someday. And, and then spending the time when I was in my field sales VP role, I first of all, I had the most amazing team that I could ever imagine having. But because I had such a really strong team, a big part of my role was coaching because I didn't have
Mm-hmm.
to give the answers. They really knew what they needed to do. And it just really solidified my passion for empowering other people to come to the solutions that are already within. And then when I went through my coach training and really being able to help other people unlock their fear and their limiting beliefs, and the one inner voice that kept telling me that was the critical deciding factor for me to leave is how can I coach other people to step in to their purpose and where God is really calling them to be if I'm not willing to do it myself.
Mm,
And so that was really the big like internal how can I say no? How can I let the fear hold me back from doing what I
yeah.
know I'm really meant to be doing?
And Michelle, you're stepping into the next question, which is around limiting beliefs, because a lot of
Mhm.
times we don't move forward because of the stories we tell ourselves, right? Not being good enough
Mhm.
or not having, enough experience to step into a new space, all those things. And the beauty of coaching. So I'll talk a little bit about coaching because that's what you and I both do. Beauty of coaching, it allows you that white space to talk that through so you can really understand what is behind all of that. And a lot of times what you find is when you start to peel the onion, the things that you believe are limiting factors of you moving
Mhm.
forward really are not, right? So one, it really are not, or um, you have to put something together so you can kind of overcome what that fear is, right? So don't want to say fear isn't real because it is real, but really being able to peel the onion to understand what's behind it,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So you talked about it for yourself in terms of some of the fears. I mean, what lessons, what tips would you give other people in terms of dealing with those limiting beliefs and fears?
Well, I would say one of the biggest lessons learned, so I am an activator, jump first and then like check to see if the parachute is attached.
Mhm.
And so anytime I've ever had fear, it's just push it down. There's no place for it. Just kick it aside and move on.
Yeah.
And while in theory that sounds good, it stays, right? And
Yeah.
so until you bring it to the surface and actually allow yourself space to sit in it and process it and figure out what is this thing that keeps coming up and why am I feeling this and where is it coming from? That's when you can truly move through it and get on the other side of it. And so the bigger the fear, the more I try to just kick it to the side and expect it to go away. And so I think for me, learning, like when people say, fearless, like nobody's fearless. We all
No.
have fear. We all have fear. And what I've learned is I have got to sit in it and figure it out so that I can then actually move through it.
Mhm.
So that's probably was definitely my biggest lesson learned. And it usually surfaces first as a feeling. So
Mhm.
I know if I'm having a day where I just am not feeling it, I have to tell okay, there's a story that's underneath the surface here that I'm telling myself, and I need to stop what I'm doing and I need to figure it out.
Mhm.
And I'm a big believer. A lot of my coaching practice is built around narrative coaching and understanding what are the stories we tell ourselves. Because there can be many truths to one situation, and we choose what we want to tell ourselves around the stories. And what you look for is what you're going to find.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is very subconscious. And so I really that was probably my big lesson learned. And honestly, I know I talked about, the first 2 times I worked with a coach, but I also worked with a coach again because really having someone for me, I'm very much a verbal processor, and so being able to talk it through and having someone that I can, that will challenge me, that will ask me questions to make me think differently. When I was going through that transition and as I was transitioning out, I worked with a coach. Last year in my own coaching practice, I worked with a coach. And I have, 15 coaches on speed dial that are part of my external coaching community that I know I can call anytime with questions or support or help. But that definitely has been a big player for me in being able to move through that.
Yeah. And I like what you said. Again, it goes back to having your network and being able to reach out to people. I know even when I stepped into this space, even doing lives, I mean, when I think about starting my practice, like really stepping into my practice, because as I've shared with
Mhm.
some folks, I got my official certification, external certification. I got that in 2017. I sat on it for about 2 years. One, because we were doing coaching at GSK, so I didn't really need
Mhm.
it, right? I didn't really need to step out. But when I really decided to step out, it was actually last year. Last year, during the time we were home, and I really wanted to figure out how could I help during this time and space, and that's where my real conversations
Mhm.
episodes came about. But really started really pushing my coaching business at that time. And for me, it wasn't even a fear of doing the coaching because I feel like I'm good at that. But I remember someone saying to me, why don't you do some live streams? And I'm like, live streams? Are you kidding me? Like, really? Um, and I told the things in my head in terms of why I couldn't do it, and to hear feedback now, and people like, oh, you're a natural. But I still, right now, even when right before I do a live, I don't accept phone calls. I just give myself that. I don't accept phone
Mhm.
calls because my nerves are just so shaken before I go live, because all
Mhm.
kinds of things can happen. Like we've had a couple of interruptions even while we're doing this, right? In terms of the internet and all of that. But to your point, it's really being able to step into that fear,
Mhm.
right? And dealing with it, because it's not going to go away unless you deal with it,
Right.
right? Yeah.
Well, and I think, for me, the time that I had at GSK was tremendously valuable to build my coaching skills. And while I have a sales background, putting yourself out there and building your coaching practice should seem easy, right?
Mm,
But um, I think the stories that I was telling myself, so leaving to go out on my own, what I didn't mention is I have, a husband and 3 kids, and my kids are high school, middle school age. So I'm very much in the phase of life where I need to, have an income that supplements similar to what I had when I left GSK. So it wasn't the fear of, am I going to be good enough to do this job? It was the fear of, can I make a living at this? Like,
mm-hmm.
what if I can't? And it was more around, what if my family suffers because I'm choosing to do something that I wanna do. Am I
Right.
being selfish to go do this? Maybe I should just take the paycheck, do the job that, I enjoyed. It wasn't like I didn't like what I was doing,
Yep.
but really taking that leap of faith, and stepping out. And I have not regretted it for a second. I had a former colleague said to me, she goes, "You're really not coming back to corporate, are you?" And I said, "I really." Well, I said, "I won't never say never, but I really don't feel like right now I'm coming back to corporate." I'll say.
Yeah. Yeah. You have a lot of people who have um, been in positions for a long time, and what they realize is when they step out, they don't miss it. I mean, it is different, right? It is different, but they're really stepping into their passion, and sometimes working for corporate America. I mean, let's face it, we've all done very well working for corporate America. I still am doing well working for corporate America, but you still, for me, I still, because my day job, I do so much more than just coaching, right? So there's other things that I do, but I get a lot of energy from doing coaching. So, for me, evenings and weekends, it really helps fulfill just that one thing that I really do love. So it brings me joy from that perspective. But I mean, I think everybody has to figure out what's going to be best for them in terms of what you want to do, and definitely doing something that you love is important. If you're not loving what you do, you're going to be miserable doing it. That's one thing I know for sure. Right?
Yeah,
Would you say the
well,
same
and
thing, Michelle?
absolutely, and I think just letting go of what you think it has to look like and being open to possibility of exploring, every person that you meet, every job that you take is exposing you to new people and new possibilities. And I would have never, I mean, even 5 years ago, I would never have thought that I would be a coach. at this stage of life. I still wanted to do it, but that was going to be like 15, 20 years from now, not now.
Mhm.
Never thought that I would have been a coach. Never thought that I would have left GSK at this stage of my life. And, the opportunities and experiences that have happened. And, sometimes you need to go through challenging experiences as well to help put you on the path to see, like, it's that whole perspective when you look back, because there definitely were some challenges through all of that transition that, if I hadn't gone through those challenges to make me feel a little bit uncomfortable through some of the space that I was in at GSK, I don't know that I would have ever it would have ever really pushed me enough to get out of my comfort zone.
Yeah.
And so when you're in that, sometimes you don't always see it, but there's so many new possibilities that come. And as somebody that had everything so calculated and planned out, it's very freeing to be on this side of it, to sit in. That's why I said, like, a couple years ago, I would have said, I'm never going back to corporate. But what I'll tell you now is I love what I'm doing, and I'm going to continue to stay open to whatever God puts in front of me. And if ever going back to corporate is where I end up, great.
Yeah.
I don't have it in my plan right now, but
Yeah, never say
you know,
never. Never
never
say
say
never.
never.
Never say
So I
never.
think, and with the workforce today, especially in corporate America too, it's not so much of the stair step ladder straight up. There's so much value in having, even like the rotation I did, and having, lateral moves, and, gaining experience in very different perspectives that may not be the title or the jump in pay that you get, but ultimately it makes you a lot more marketable across the board.
Yeah, you're stepping into a space where, when people think about career moving, and I'm going to get into this during my workshop on Saturday, but the whole mindset, career versus job, and what does that look like, right? And if you're clearly on a path, if you have a career mindset, it's not the steps that you take is not about the money, right? It's about
Mhm.
developing the skills, the knowledge, the capabilities to help you to continue to progress, right? Ultimately into whatever your dream role, your vision is for yourself, longer term. But to your point, it could be a promotion. It may not be, right? One of the things we talk about, Michelle, you'll nod when I say this term. We talk about breadth and depth of experience, right? And that doesn't come from all the time from just um, moving up, right? Some of those vertical moves are important, right? To learn other parts of the business, right? But you do need to figure out ultimately what's your destination that you're trying to get to, right? Because then that'll help shape some of those next steps, those moves that you need to do to close those gaps that you need to close for yourself so that you could be competitive, right?
Mhm.
So, and you've definitely done that throughout your career. And this one, like I said, this one was a big move for you. But I'm so glad to be able to connect with you, Michelle. Like I said, when I was thinking about having this conversation in my head, I was like, who can I talk to who's really made a big, big change? I mean, people retire. Of course, when you retire, you're making a change. You can decide what you want to do. But this wasn't about retirement for you. This was really, I am going to make a big change from a career perspective for myself. And you did it. And I commend you for doing that and stepping into your faith and stepping into your passion. So closing words, Michelle.
I guess I would say my closing words is, mindset is everything, and you become what you think about, and really being intentional on your narrative and the stories that you're creating. And um, I'm such a believer in really focusing on, positivity, and really working hard to control that inner narrative to serve you, and just trusting that you can make it happen,
Hmm.
right? Whatever you're dreaming and thinking of is possible if you
Yes.
just continue to stay forward momentum. There's a Earl Nightingale quote. He says, "Success is daily progress towards a worthy idea or goal." You don't have to know how to get to the finish line. You just need to know the next step that you're going to take. to get
Mhm.
there, and just daily progress.
I like that, Michelle. Well, thank you. I'm going to place you in my green room while I close out,
All
and then
right.
I'll join you in a few minutes. Okay. Thank you,
Okay.
Michelle. So, thank you everyone for joining us. Like I said earlier in the year, I wanted to do coaching moments to provide a forum to share tips around career and life coaching. This one I wanted to do as a prelude to my workshop, which will be on Saturday. And that workshop is preparing for your next career move. And a lot of the things that Michelle talked about, I will be covering during the session. So if you have not purchased tickets, you still can through Eventbrite. So, not too late. And I'll be covering a lot of different things during that session. We'll be talking about your mindset, something that Michelle talked about, interview preparation, resume writing, professional networking, job offer negotiation, and social media. Setting yourself up, leveraging social media, which is a great networking tool. So you definitely want to set yourself up right for that. So if you have any questions or you need some assistance with figuring some things out, feel free to give me send me an email at mbiggs.mybest@gmail.com. And we can set something up, set up a chemistry meeting. I would love to work with you. And that's it. Thank you for joining in to this segment and have a great rest of the week. Take care.